Yeah, it's an important topic, very, very sensitive topic. I was just thinking back to my own training when I was a registrar and thinking back to now being the consultant and being involved in the training program. I can't say specifically or anything that I can remember, and I suppose often these negative experiences you tend to block out and you tend to want to just remember the positive things. But I did not recall specifically any consultants bullying. So I think that's, I suppose that's a credit to our program, or at least my experience. What I do remember is some consultants, some of them in supervisory positions, may not have seemed very caring or not very helpful, but it didn't actually constitute bullying per se. What I did find actually was bullying from younger colleagues, my immediate registrars below me, and because I was the only one in my year, I think that they felt superior in terms that they had four of them versus me just being the one in my year. So that wasn't consultant bullying; it was more peer bullying. But I was able to move on from that, and ultimately I was ahead of them anyway. So it didn't affect me so much in that regard.
Graham, what you've just said though, I think one of the more subtle forms of bullying is social exclusion. I think you're absolutely right. And I was talking to a world-class colleague the other day from my era about this topic, and they were moved to tears telling me how when they had started as a new consultant, they had been excluded by the incumbent consultants from all the key decisions and key departmental activity. And I think these very subtle forms of bullying are actually going on perhaps more than we realise.
I remember also one of the professors of ophthalmology. He said in his first year of training, he had an older consultant, very famous consultant that probably should remain nameless, but he was a very well known short fuse. He used to shout at staff at all levels, from registrars, nursing staff to other consultants, and uh, was such a bully, but probably wasn't labelled that way back then, that this consultant, who is now professor, wanted to leave ophthalmology. And I know it's one of the strategies is moving away, and that's in fact what he did. He actually finished the program in that city and moved to another city, and picked himself up and went on with ophthalmology and became a very good consultant. But just that first year of his training was memorably a very bad experience for him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, a very wise friend of mine recently, we were talking about conflict management actually, and we were talking about people who shout at other people, even within meetings in public. And he said to me, if you're going to go and shout at someone and humiliate them like that, you might as well go up to them and punch them as hard as you can in the nose, because that is the effect it's going to have on that person. They will never forget what you've done to them. And, I think it's really important to remember that things like shouting at people and humiliating them, particularly in public, that is bullying. It's behaviour that makes an individual feel both intimidated and offended. And my worry is that the impact that this behaviour has on our younger physicians and surgeons and nurses as they're coming through, and we just can't afford to lose good people because of this behaviour.
It's interesting. One of your slides, I think it's the fifth slide, about let's get one thing straight, it's not your fault. It's an interesting statement because we don't like to blame the person being bullied as that they're the victim and it's not their fault. But in a sense, I do think there's certain types of personalities that attract bullies more, and bullies can identify them and target those individuals. I remember I saw once something on criminals identifying people in the street who they'd want to potentially steal their purse, say, and they were profiling, showing pictures of various individuals to these known criminals, and the criminals would pick, oh yeah, that'd be an easy target, no problem there, and they showed them a picture of a little old lady with a handbag, and they said, oh no, we wouldn't target her. And they said, well, why wouldn't you target her? Well, if you look at her carefully, she's walking very cautiously, she's sort of aware of the people around her, and if you see her holding her bag, she's holding it like it's her life. So there's no doubt that if you tried to steal her bag, she'd fight. She'd be hanging onto that bag like it was her life. So yeah, she wouldn't be an easy target. But I think some people who are bullied versus the people who don't get bullied, it may be part of their innate personality that makes them a target for bullying. And this may be a fact that we can help people who are bullied perhaps change some of their mannerism, maybe change some of their behaviours.
Well, I think you're right. The reason why I wrote this thing about it's not your fault is because I think a lot of people who are bullied will somehow twist it and think to themselves, well, it must be the way I am. It must be the way I'm working within the department. It must be the way I do things. When actually the bully has already decided who they're going to attack. Now, you're right though, Graham. There's absolutely no doubt that there are certain things that you can do which will make it more likely that the bully may attack you. So, for example, you may disagree with something they say. They may feel that you're blocking progression of their very important ideas. So you have got to be very careful once you identify a person who you think fits that bullying criteria. And if they're in a position of power, you've got to be incredibly careful with how you interact with them. And the first thing I would say is it should always be with a witness present, never get isolated. And the other side of the coin, of course, is that the people who are perhaps a little introverted, and perhaps they don't communicate particularly well, they frighten easily, and those kind of people, the bully will be straight onto them.
So yeah, I think maybe part of this coping strategy for people getting bullies is to educate them about individual behaviours that may increase their risk of being targeted and maybe help them overcome some of these characteristics.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, when I the slide I said about what fuels bullies, you've got personal failure and prejudice. Now, you can't change that. But one thing about bullies is that they have intense professional jealousy. And so I suppose if you're in a position where you're perceived as being very successful, again, ironically, that may make you a target for a bully. So there are ways of managing your own success which you have to think about very carefully.
The title of this is consultant bullying, but as a consultant and a trainer and previous Q&E director, we're actually bullied by some of our own registrars. One I remember particularly he had trouble passing his exams, and he wasn't blaming himself. He was very much blaming the system and the way he was being trained. And he was quite a narcissistic type personality, and believed so strongly in himself that it couldn't be possibly his failure. It had to be the failure of the system. And we did have quite a lot of trouble with him. He eventually did pass, and now he's a consultant. So things did improve somewhat. And we've actually had a recent trainee that had to be dismissed, strangely bullying consultants. And there were a lot of problems with even shouting matches, totally inappropriate professional behaviour. There's this bullying not just from the consultant, but also the candidates and registrars can actually bully the consultants, going the other way.
And of course, what you're just talking about there, you're entering a major field of litigation in the current world, that people actually take things further. I would say the key thing, I think when you come to team building, one of the core survival skills you need is personality profiling. I just can't emphasize that enough. And it is very, very important to be able to identify personality traits such as narcissism, because these kind of people can destroy your team. And you need to have quite sophisticated personality profiling skills when you're building clinical surgical research teams.
It's funny you should mention that. For quite a number of years, the college used a personality profiling psychologist to actually select candidates before they entered the training program. And I remember the first candidate who had trouble passing his exams and with the narcissistic personality, he was identified on the personality profiling as being highly narcissistic, not a team player. Unfortunately, at the time, we felt inclined to have to accept him because he'd done very well in every other aspect of selection. And the personality profile was only a smaller component, but unfortunately it did eventuate that he was exactly how they profiled him originally.
Well, one of the interesting things about personality profiling is it's a very important science now. If you think about the captains of industry, these are people with multi-billion-dollar, kind of portfolios. And the teams that you construct around these people are incredibly important. So in medicine, I think we've been a little slow to catch up with this knowledge and how important it is. And whilst we don't want to create a medical society of clones, what we do want to do is weed out people who are going to damage patients or their colleagues. That is extremely important.
I think what happened to this personality profiling before selection was that people were actually knowing that this was going to occur and actually going to psychologists and getting training on how to overcome the questions and to give the best answers to give you the best profile. So unfortunately the system broke down after about 5 years, but
well, Graham, I'll tell you something very interesting. As part of this consultant survival skills course, I've recently been increasing my knowledge about the trainee and difficulty. It's a fantastic topic, the colleague or trainee in difficulty. And I would go so far as to say that during the training, you should probably have personality profiling annually so that you can identify poor performers, because things change. And I think also that if you have perhaps a very bad run or a very large number of complaints made against you as a consultant, again, you should probably be subjected to personality profiling. And there's only so much you can hide. The truth always outs.
Mm. Well, I suppose it depends how far in depth you go, and I suspect that the personality profiling that they were using was probably too shallow to really, get a good profile, and potentially could be manipulated with training. So yeah, that's probably why it didn't work.
Well, I think you can manipulate the personality profiling. What you can't manipulate is 360-degree appraisal.
Mm.
And I have to say, I think 360 appraisal is a little stroke of genius, because it is very hard. If you're a repeat offender shouting and being rude to everybody, to pass a 360 appraisal is pretty tough.
Yeah, well, that was what was happening with this the second candidate that had to be dismissed. Very sweet, very, very nice to the immediate consultants that felt were influential in career, but everyone else, like peers, nursing staff, theatre orderlies, down to the cleaners, knew this person had a major personality problem. So that's where the 360-degree appraisal could potentially be so important. What do you think about mentor programs? Like, we actually started a mentor program many years ago where every registrar who was put on the program had to choose a consultant mentor, and that mentor had to be not part of the QEC committee, just to not have any bias within the Qualifications in Education Committee. And if they were to have any troubles, they could go to this consultant, and potentially that consultant could represent them if there were any issues to the Q&E committee.
Well, I'm just finishing off writing a book which is called Becoming an Effective Mentor, How and Why. And I think finding mentors and becoming a mentor is, again, another critical consultant survival skill. The problem with mentoring is this: it's time consuming, and you need to be trained how to do it. It is not something that can occur en masse in anything other than an organized way, because the problem is it creates more problems than it solves, I'm afraid, when the mentors are not properly trained in how to mentor. For example, a mentor is not a counsellor, and you need to know the difference.
It's interesting because that program has not been successful. In fact, the candidates, I was on the QEC, so I wasn't able to be a mentor for those years, but in those years, in those 10 years I was on the QEC, I think once we had a mentor come to the QEC meeting representing a trainee, or once, and that was extreme circumstances. So the trainees don't access the mentors, or don't seem to access the mentors, and possibly it's a two-way thing going on, because if a trainee approaches a mentor, it may be perceived as a sign of weakness, or a sign that they're having problems that they don't want anyone to be privy to. And as you say, the mentors themselves may not be adequately trained to provide the guidance necessary for that trainee. So,
absolutely, the three pillars of mentoring: support, challenge, and vision. But you need to have a basic level of knowledge before you can become a formal mentor. And everybody in the modern world wants something for nothing. Well, here's the fact: you're not going to set up a world-class mentoring program in your institution without pump priming it with time and funding. But if you do, it can have a transformative effect within an organization. I'm absolutely passionate about mentoring, but it's just got to be done properly.
So in the UK, how far is that establish?
It's very rudimentary. Now, for example, though, the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh is introducing a mentoring program for new consultants. I don't know too much about it, but I know they are doing that. I've got a lecture on, becoming an effective mentor, and the benefits to both the mentor and the mentee are absolutely massive, but it has to be done properly. Mentoring is not just sitting down counseling somebody because they don't feel well and stuff like that. There's far more to it, and it needs to be done in a sophisticated way.
Are there any programs that you know of throughout the world that have an effective program?
There's very few. There are programs to learn how to become effective mentors. I mean,
training programs, ophthalmic registrar programs. Is anyone implemented the mentor-mentee program yet?
I don't know myself of any published evidence for that. I know a lot of places are looking at trying to introduce mentoring because it is so fundamental and transformative, but I'm not aware of any functioning, validated systems.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it makes so much sense and it could be so beneficial, yet nowhere has really adopted it in a major way. So there must be some fundamental obstacle stopping it.
Cost and time.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, everybody wants something for nothing, and the kind of people who are going to be mentors, they're good people, they have massive knowledge, but they probably also don't have a huge amount of time. I mean, I mentored one of our new consultants. I've just clocked up 500 hours of mentoring with this person, 2 hours a week for 5 years.
Wow.
And, I can honestly say that I've transformed their lives, and actually the reciprocal has probably also occurred, because a true mentoring relationship is a dialectic where you both are willing to learn from each other. And that was a massive investment of my time and energy, which I feel was well worthwhile for the healthcare system. But and I'm trained, I've just written a book on how to mentor effectively. It is a transformative process for the mentor, but it's not something that you can just do. You've got to be trained how to do it. Like you've got to be trained how to be an examiner or a counsellor or anything. You can't just say, I'm a mentor. It doesn't work like that.